As I reflect upon the dismal results of the midterms, I'm trying to think about all the different ways in which the playing field could have been manipulated, you can say unleveled, either by the Democrats explicitly or by their allies in the media, in the tech community, and so on. And I'm reminded of the work of one particular psychologist. This is Dr. Robert Epstein, who has been studying the impact of Google in manipulating search results. Now, who is Dr. Epstein? Well, here we go. He's a senior research psychologist at the American Institute for Behavioral Research and Technology. This is in California. He's been a research psychologist for 40 years. He's been on the board of Psychology Today and Scientific American Mind. He's a PhD from Harvard University. He's written 15 books, more than 300 scientific and mainstream articles. And he has really been focusing since 2012, so now for a decade, on what tech platforms in general, but specifically Google. See, Google is in a very unique position because, think about it, Google has become kind of a verb. Let's Google it. And let's Google it means let's get more information about it. Let's run a search. And while there are a couple of other smaller search platforms, much, much smaller, Google really has a virtual monopoly. And this makes Google, in a way, more powerful than the other platforms. And let's remember, Google also owns YouTube. So Google has that kind of combined power. Now, what Robert Epstein has found is that Google has systematically manipulated search results. And they do it particularly to influence elections. He's been arguing that they've been doing this for a while, but it's quite possible that they have even ramped it up in recent elections. Now, Google sort of denies they're doing this, but Epstein's evidence seems to show that they do it. And he says that Google has, quote, the ability to shift attitudes, opinions, beliefs, purchases, and votes without people knowing it. Now, the key point here is without people knowing it. Google uses a technique called ephemeral content. And this means fleeting content that appears but then disappears. And that's the key point. If it disappears, it's really hard to then go back and look at it because it's here and it's gone. It's almost like if one of those apps where I send you a photo and you get the photo for 15 seconds and then the photo's gone. So I've sent it to you. You've seen it. It's had an impact on you, but then it disappears. So here's Dr. Epstein. Fleeting content like search results, news feeds, search suggestions that appear before our eyes impact our thinking and behavior and then disappear, leaving no trace. You can't go back in time and see what the search results people were shown, at least not under normal circumstances. And what Epstein does is he does these experiments to show that, first of all, this is pervasive. This is happening not, even though in his experiments he exposes people to content on a short-term basis and then measures the impact on their thinking, he goes, listen, try to imagine what's going to happen when you get this kind of content multiple times a day, every single day, on and on and on. So he says that the impact of Google is made even worse and is in some ways even more insidious because it is driven by computer algorithms. See, if somebody were to tell you that there's a guy behind the curtain and he's manipulating searches so that he tells you what you should see, you're going to be automatically suspicious. Like, who is that guy? What's his agenda? On what basis is he making these selections? But because Google is running algorithms, you tend to think, well, listen, if I search for 2000 Mules or I search for Dinesh, I'm going to be getting the most common sites. But no, you're not. You're not getting the most common sites. Google's algorithm is fixing what you're actually seeing. This is the key point. And according to Robert Epstein, quote, if you have been using Google for more than a decade, they have the equivalent of 3 million pages of information on you. He goes, if that number sounds ridiculously high, bear in mind they're collecting information about you over more than 200 different platforms. Not just Gmail, YouTube, the Google search engine, Android phones. But if you have a Fitbit fitness tracker, you could be sending physiological data to Google 24 hours a day. And so Google owns all these other subsidiary companies, all of which are vacuuming data and sending them to Google. He goes, if you visit websites that use Google Maps, which millions of websites do, or that use Google Analytics to track traffic to their websites, Google can legally track everything you do on those websites. Google can easily demote websites so that they appear infrequently or not at all. They can block access to websites. You may think it's a website. No one can stop access to it. Google can, so you can't get access to that website through Google. This is a very powerful company, and I think one of the questions the Republican House needs to look at is how is Google using their power? It may be time to rein in this monopoly. And a first step, the House can't do it all by itself, but what it can do, a necessary first step, is to get the facts out, to conduct an investigation, and expose Google for what Google is actually doing.